Thank you very much indeed, Ceann Comhairle, and I'm very privileged to be the closing contribution to what I think has been a very important debate. This issue about our cooperation, our future on this island together, I think is central to so many deputies in this House, and the contributions throughout the afternoon, heartfelt, not from any script, but from people's lived experience, I think reflects the importance of us restoring the institutions in Northern Ireland, building on the peace that has been there for the last 25 years. And I'm very glad and honoured on behalf of the Government to make the closing remarks. I was very fortunate to be in Belfast last weekend. I attended some of the events organised by Queen's University Belfast to mark the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. And I was particularly glad I met General John Shaslin, who was remarkably impressive. Himself and Harry Holkiri, the former Finnish Prime Minister, and obviously George Mitchell had a central role. And if anyone, I think, is looking for maybe some understanding, I think, of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, I'd recommend maybe setting aside the some 45 minutes that George Mitchell took to review what happened in his speech to Queen's University Belfast on Monday last week. It was a remarkably succinct, clear, impartial, and in the end, hopeful speech. And I think it started by setting out the history which had led to the Good Friday Agreement. And I think he spared nothing in making sure, as best he could, to mention each of the people who had played a key role. He obviously, and Bertie Ahern was in attendance, he recognised the work that Bertie Ahern and the Irish civil servants who was part of that negotiation team, going right back to John Bruton's time and before, in terms of the patient, diplomatic way that the Irish civil service and politicians had approached this issue. He obviously gave similar due respect and attention and thanks to Tony Blair and the similar British civil service and in the working out of this agreement, formed such an incredibly strong bond that is really important we hold on to that this day. And he went through. But I think it was most important speech in going through all the different parties that were involved, recognising obviously the immense role of John Hume in a sense reframing the whole approach of Irish nationalism, in my mind, in the way he did. But what I think was most inspiring and was most impressive was he handed the ownership back of the Good Friday Agreement right back to the parties in Northern Ireland who had been the signatories to it, and ultimately to the people of Northern Ireland who voted for it and stood by it. And I think all parties, Sinn Féin, the Loyalists, Unionists, Women's Coalition, of every different grouping. And I think that was a very appropriate marking of the 25th anniversary. We also had a role here in the South. I, like many others, I heard Deputy Nolan there say she comes from a Republican tradition. I sense the same. My grandfather, who I was very close to, fought in the War of Independence. It was in my absolute DNA, the desire still is, for United Ireland. But I do remember that day and the constitutional amendment question put to us regarding giving up, ceding on Article 2 and 3 of the Constitution, and feeling proud and part of the process because we too are now centrally involved. It was effectively a reframing of the whole position which gave us a real role. And I think if that vote was to be put back to the people today, I'm absolutely certain in the South, the similar overwhelming majority of people would support the Good Friday Agreement and would look to see it fully implemented in all its guises. The truth is, I see it in my everyday work here in the Dáil and within government departments, is that Ireland is still very divided. Our power systems are divided. To start with, Kenny, with the very basic connection, the energy system we have is not properly connected. The transport system we have, you'll know, I'm living in a border county. Do we have good cross-border transport systems? We don't. In the area of the environment recognises no border. But the environment, to a certain extent, is ignored in the Good Friday Agreement and even in the Brexit, the functioning of the agreement regarding the exit of UK from the European Union. Again, the environment was not taken into account. And I believe the healing of those divisions is now our key responsibility. And I believe that the mechanism that the Taoiseach, who was here a short while ago, devised with ourselves and Fine Gael in government of a shared Ireland approach is the appropriate way of actually fulfilling our constitutional commitment that we voted in that Good Friday Agreement time 25 years ago, to really deliver practical connections, to heal the divisions, not on a identity political, party political, nationalist unionist way, but in practical measures that bring our island together. Recognising we have east-west connections as well as north-south. We have to repair the damage that's been done by Brexit with our relations with the United Kingdom, and have similar cooperation and agreement on issues such as environment and energy in my area. I see that as being as important, and that may help us overcome some of the divisions that exist on a north-south basis. Like so many others here as well, I also am really impatient and interested in seeing the institutions returned. We are an all-island party. We are very connected to what happens obviously up north. We're out canvassing door to door to look to the members of the Green Party in Northern Ireland to get elected in the upcoming local elections. I see no reason following that why we should not see a restoration of the institutions. Recognising, as our party does, that the institutions also need to be reformed. We can't just keep everything in stasis because the institutional arrangements are not functioning. The fact that 9 out of the 25 years the Assembly was not sitting, institutions were not in place, is the first obvious critique you would have to make of what was agreed 25 years ago. It's not that we just keep it in aspic, we have to keep reviewing, and I believe there's an urgent need for reform, but that firstly needs the Assembly to return to be able to give political ownership back to the people who have responsibilities here in doing that, which is the parties and people in Northern Ireland. Can I conclude, Cancorla, going back to again that message George Mitchell gave. What did he say in his speech about within the impossible is the word possible? Very obvious pun, but actually there was a kernel of real political truth in what he said, and I think that is a good way to conclude this debate. He spoke with real optimism. In a world where we're driven by such conflict, where social media and other news systems are all about division and despair, and a slightly depressed review of where circumstances are, he could not have been more confident and upbeat and positive. And in particular, his positivity was centred around real admiration for the people in Northern Ireland, for the people. He had gone out of his way to listen, and to listen with respect. And in that listening and in providing dignity, he won everyone's trust to be able to come to an agreement that no one thought possible. And I think that's a similar culture or characteristic or approach we need today. We need to optimistically, confidently, with dignity and respect, approach the living out the potential that was delivered by the Good Friday Agreement. We do that not in confrontation, not in pointing the finger or in blame, but actually recognising the strengths that exist on this island, north and south, and valuing those and trusting the people in the north, particularly and the parties in the north, to start returning to that moment, that special moment when people came together and signed and voted for a future that brought peace, thank God, but also brought an end to centuries of division. It's that scale, that was why it was so important. We need now to build on that and build in the next 25 years a shared island that we can all be proud of. Thank you, Cancorla.